966.
This is the 966, episode 86. Hello, Richard.
Hey, how you doing?
Good. Good.
You do such a good job on intros. I was thinking of, at some point, one of us will have to carry the load for the other. And I'm going, how would I do an intro? Because Lucians are really good.
Well, thank you. I will give you my AI plugin. I'm not actually a human being. This is just an AI thing. And
are you out playing with the kids right now?
Yeah, but the real Lucien is not here, and this is a bot. No, thank you. Yes. Well, we like to get it. We had a little structure to the show with an intro, and everybody probably notices this now, our regular listeners, but we sort of have a normal format that we follow, and we like to do it that way because it is comfortable for us, Richard. So we hope that people like it.
Yeah, that's right. I guess familiarity breeds love.
Yes.
And appreciation. And viewers.
Isn't
that how it goes? Isn't that how the saying goes?
Apparently is how it's going for the 966 because the viewership and listenership keeps growing and now is kind of staggering, Richard. We were talking about it a little bit ago.
Wow.
It's cool. We did not see this coming. So thank you to everybody for listening and watching us.
Much.
Yes. And just a reminder, what would also help us out is if you could toss us a kind review if you have it in you on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or YouTube. Follow us on any of those platforms. It helps us, and it introduces you to us as well. We meet a lot of our guests that way. So thank you for being here.
I did like the comment. We had one comment on one of the videos. What it was just simple. It's football, not soccer, lads.
I was gonna. It's so funny you mentioned that. I was going to read that.
Oh, sorry.
No, I'm glad you did, because we want to start mentioning some of the feedback that we get. And I was going to select that one because it's just hilarious. It's like, hey, guys, it's not soccer, it's football. And in that segment where we discussed Messi possibly going to Saudi Arabia, we did say soccer, which is just what we call it here. So it's so funny.
We missed a trick on that episode because we didn't think what about this possibility, this angle? We talked about the various angles and one was Saudi somewhere, probably Al Hilal, Inter Miami FC, and going back to Barca possibly, but we did not talk about the possibility of going to Newcastle United.
That would be cool. Why isn't that a thing? That could be a thing.
I think it would be a thing. I think it makes sense. It'd make him happy. He'd still be in the Premier League. He'd be quote unquote. Anyway, it's interesting. This is all very interesting and as yet unresolved.
Richard, just as you were saying that, you found a really awesome piece earlier this week. I think it was in ESPN.com, but some dude was breaking down like why Messi is still one of the greatest, even though he's getting a little bit older.
Yes.
Used a ton of data on how he is as a striker and just everything up. Did I lose my volume there? Okay.
You're with us.
We're ready.
A little bit.
Okay, we're already having technical issues.
You were getting all exercise worked up.
I was excited about Messi. What can I say? I do have a very precarious situation here with things balancing on other things, so I'll try not to get too animated. But anyway, interesting article. I'll put it in the show notes, but it's a little bit about long form on how good Messi still is. That's the point.
I thought that was interesting because, the popular press would have it that he had an off second half with PSG, but that was really interesting. When you dig into the analytics, he's still premier.
Yeah. I mean, the World Cup was. Yeah. We talked about that, but just wow. So anyway, Richard, let's get going. What's your one big thing this week?
My one big thing. As we know, Syria's Arab League membership was revoked in 2011 after Bashar al-Assad ordered a violent crackdown on protesters that spiraled the country into a war that's since killed nearly 500,000 people and displaced another 23 million. It's a complete disaster in Syria. This past Sunday, after an absence that lasted more than a decade, the Arab League voted unanimously to readmit Syria. This was done during an emergency session in Cairo. And in a bit of an understatement, the Secretary General of the Arab League said, quote, "I strongly expect that many European and Western countries may not welcome this Arab decision, but this is an independent Arab decision which sees that the Arab interest requires at this particular time not to leave the Syrian issue like this," unquote. And sort of to confirm that point, the U.S. State Department spokesperson said, quote, "We do not believe that Syria merits readmission to the Arab League at this time, and it's a point that we've made clear with all our partners," unquote. So, momentous news, really. And what to make of all this. And we had a lot of commentary in the Sustig Review, which we always cover good analysis and good reporting. I happened to see, and I don't know if I passed this on to you, Lucien, I happened to see a really interesting Twitter thread from Badr El Saif. And Badr El Saif is a associate professor at Kuwait University. He also has his own consulting firm. He's a Kuwaiti. It was interesting. There was a Kuwaiti was talking about. He was talking about specifically about the KSA perspective on readmission of Saudi Arabia and reopening of diplomatic relations. So I'm just going to read his Twitter feed. I know that sounds weird, but I think it's important to hear a voice from the region as to why this is going on right now.
Yeah, go for it.
So obviously the thread is, a series of threads. So I'll start at one. So I'll just read it. KSA just resumed relations with Syria. It's more important than the actual Arab League admission. Both KSA and Saudi Arabia and Syria hope to benefit from this move, but the Syrian regime shouldn't hold a party. Its record is no secret, and the Saudis look to advance their interest. How so? Saudi Arabia was once skeptical about normalization with Damascus, but it wants to work towards a more robust, integrated Arab order, plus more urgently combat a tripartite ticking bomb. So that tripartite ticking bomb is drugs, terrorism, and the refugees are three pillars of a ticking time bomb for the Levant, Gulf, and larger MENA, Middle East, North Africa region. No serious action can be taken on any of these files without somehow dealing with the Syrian regime. All three files have come to a standstill or face challenges. Captagon, which, as listeners and viewers know, we did a segment on last episode. Captagon is infesting the Gulf. Neighboring cities are struggling with refugees, and thousands of Islamic State prisoners remain in camps with no effective rehab plans. The Gulf is bulldozing into the future. These issues need to be resolved for its vision plans to work. The U.S. has no forward-looking policy on Syria. U.S. has sanctions there, Caesar Act there, and then what? ? You can't leave people hostage to a stagnant position. If Syria was next door to the U.S., would it act this way? ? Everyone knows they're dealing with a bloody regime, and it won't change overnight. 12 years of civil war have shown that. Syria controlling the drug problem and holding off punishment against returning refugees is something to be skeptical about. Still, got to try and find creative means. Even with the Iran-Saudi deal, we are not on a different planet. This is the Middle East. There are a few sustainable success stories to count and more issues to resolve. In parentheses, he adds, think Sudan as the latest example. Closing up, the point of view saying Assad shouldn't be approached is noted, but what's the alternative? The status quo is unsustainable. Let's see what gains may come from this mass regional turnaround. And he closes with hope, dignity, justice, peace, and prosperity are part of these gains. And then in parentheses again, wishful, I know, close parentheses. I have some other thoughts on this, but I'll stop here because I want to get your observations. Again, we read a lot of analyses on this. I thought this sort of captured why it was thought it was necessary to move forward and break the logjam, because nothing was working and they had real issues that weren't being addressed. And this is, again, a point of view from the region. But anyway, so that's my one big thing this week.
Well, I just have two very quick observations, Richard, and then I kind of want, and thank you for handing the talking stick over to me, but I want to give it back to you because I want to hear more on your observations. But just two things really quickly. One, I mean, that is such a good point about engagement being a way to solve some of these problems, because they're all getting worse and they're all heading in one direction. And if you don't change something up, then you can't expect a different outcome. And I think Saudi Arabia may be saying that, hey, like, let's engage with them and see if we can figure out how to tighten up some of this drug trade, which is flooding the Gulf region. We're the customers. And, we talked about this, I think it was last week, Richard, in the Captagon segment.
Yeah.
Captagon, yeah. And then, just that's my other point I really want to make is that please, if you missed it, you can just listen to that segment. But we talked about Captagon. It was Richard's one big thing last week, and it's really a good sort of overview discussing the complexity of the problem in the region. And Richard did a really great job kind of, distilling that all together into one understandable point, which is essentially that Syria is a narco state now. And the only way to get them to not be a narco state is to try to curb your own demand, but also, work with them to, and Richard, they did have a recent attack killing, I think, one of the drug lords in Syria this week.
Jordanians did a strike, and they just had another $8 million tablets intercepted in Saudi. And it's interesting. The part of the rapprochement, part of the discussion, I gather, as reported, it could be wrong, is that the Saudis are talking to the Assad regime about saying, we'll give you $4 billion if you shut this down. I mean, this is how important it is to the region. But so again, that's possibly, that's sheer speculation. I don't know. But it does speak to the fact that what's something we talked about during that segment, and it was a good point, was that, if it's a criminal enterprise that's, has tremendous revenues, why would they stop? And you got to give them, some other reason. But the reason I turned it over to you, Lucien, is because I have a lot to say on it. And I'm not sure if we have the time.
I think we should go for it, Richard. We do have a bit of a hard stop, but I'd like for you to keep going. I'm going to shut up now.
You sure?
Please go. Yeah. Yes, absolutely. Absolutely.
I just thought it was telling. If Syria was next door to the U.S., would it act this way? And this is what he said in his thread. And we talk a lot about on the show about having to come up with a new approach, revamp our paradigms and our perspectives on the region and what it needs and what advances our interests there. And it seems to me, I mean, U.S. foreign policy in the region has really been dominated by a post 9/11 paradigm, and which was actuated sort of by the global war on terrorism. And you can go through it. Did actually, quash Al Qaeda. And we had allies in this globally. You remember Saudi Arabia was a primary target of Al Qaeda and suffered all sorts of violent attacks in 03, 04, 05, even in 06. I mean, just really some virulent and dangerous stuff, but they were able to shut down. So obviously Saudi Arabia and the US is in league on this. So that makes sense, but that Al Qaeda counterterrorism approach led to a misguided disaster in Iraq, which created ISIS, which required massive military mobilization, resulted in terrible suffering, the empowerment of Iran in the region. The 9/11 paradigm also, again, I couldn't disagree more with, you have to go in, at the time Afghanistan is a broken state, parasitized by terrorist organizations. You have to go in and take them out. So we did that, but also stayed for 20 years in a monstrously expensive, ultimately unsuccessful, 20-year nation building exercise. Again, people watched us do this. The motivation, counterterrorism, understood. The results, extraordinarily unfortunate and damaging to many people in the region and destabilizing the region. Efforts to counter Iran's nuclear program led to the JCPO. Yes, JCPO, another worthwhile endeavor. But, probably executed poorly, implemented poorly, in that we didn't talk to our Arab neighbors and our Arab partners on this before we did it. And then, of course, it was just completely upended when, President Trump, discarded it, left it, and, opted for a maximum pressure, all of which has been an abject failure in terms of reining in Iran's nuclear program. So the point being is, American motivations over the last 20 years, countering terrorism, countering nuclear Iran, they have validity. The implementation of these policies have sort of left the region fractured, destabilized, at odds. And it's a region looking for new ideas. And they're not coming from us. Uh, and this is why, we talk about, the rise of regional solutions and the outburst of diplomacy in the region. We talk particularly about Mohammed bin Salman, but others are active the same way, because that counter approach, that confrontation approach, led in many ways, has just locked up the region into seemingly unsolvable positions and things that are just stuck in the mud. To put it politely, when you think of the consequences of that in terms of human suffering. So I just thought it was interesting. And his point is, if this were next door to us, would we let it sit for 20 years? Would we sort of be, and especially at this juncture? And the problem with Syria, of course, is Iran and Russia intervened in 2015 and tilted the tables to Assad. And our options at that point, short of going to war, were to try and establish an outpost in northern Syria and do what we've done. But again, it's a static situation. It's not moving. It's not going anywhere. Well, everything else is going to hell. So you can see why they're looking for new ideas in the region. I'd like for us, the U.S., to be creative and move forward. I mean, there's some optimism for the Abraham Accords. It's a worthwhile platform. It's something we should support. We've established the I2 U2 platform. You're familiar with that. Israel and India, UAE, US, talking about economic. And there's a lot of economic. It's really economic motivations and underpinnings here, which is really important. Last week, US, Saudi, Emirati, and Indian national security advisors were in Riyadh discussing a possible major joint infrastructure project to connect the Gulf and Arab countries via a network of railroads and shipping lanes. Good. More of this. We need new thinking. We need to change the plan. We have to think new economies and trade and technology and striving countries tired of conflict. So the State Department can be upset, that Syria is invited back to the Arab League. But honestly, from their point of view, as this, this, Kuwaiti professor and, has written, it's not working for us. Let's try something new. We have real problems we have to address. Let's try something new.
Yeah, Richard, that's really, really good. It's also not just that we are stagnant on ideas from the US and kind of stagnant on leadership. It's that we need to, and hopefully we are already taking an approach where we are supportive of ideas that may not be exactly what we would want to see as the American foreign policy power that we are. And I think you saw a little taste of it in this statement from, I think it was Jake Sullivan, and you mentioned it, where he said, yeah, this isn't really what we want or what the US would endorse. But this is not our call. This is the Arab League's call, and we support what they're doing. We support their impetus and their initiative here, if that's what they want to do. And I want to see personally more of that, where we're supporting Saudi Arabia and our allies in the region acting in their interests, because that supports our interest as allies. And so there's not just a little brother, big brother, oil for arms type thing going on anymore. And I think that's a good direction to be heading in. And that was a really good one big thing. Just really good.
A shout out to Badr Al Saif. He's the young Kuwaiti, and like I said, he's the president of Al Saif Consulting, an assistant professor at Kuwait University. And he doesn't know, I'm using his tweets, but to your point, that Saudi and Iran agreement that was closed anyway by China, was brokered sort of by Iraq and Oman, but closed by China. The U.S. was smart there to just say, yeah, great, good for the region,
Well, and you mentioned you gave a really good sort of historical, like the last 23 years, pretty much 22 years, really since 9/11. What I think what we would dream about during that phase when we were involved in all of these conflicts is getting out of them and having the region and other regions around the world solve their own problems, so that we're not always the first one in there doing some offensive military situation where we're just absolutely not welcome to do that. Like you mentioned, Afghanistan was different than Iraq. Iraq was a massive mistake that caused so many problems. And that's like, I feel like we should be happier that we're in this moment where we have an emerging regional power in Saudi Arabia, and you have sort of a regional multipolar system of leaders trying to solve problems that don't involve us going in there and banging our fists on the table and saying this is how it's going to be. We're America, so do it.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. And I'd like to be associated with some positive wins. And by that, I mean, Iraq was a debacle. Afghanistan was unfortunate. You know, we came in on the side on the Arab Spring, you know, with democracies for the most part. I mean, it's certainly in Egypt, you know, that was a disappointment for all. You don't have any of those that are, you know, remaining. Those countries that were active at that point are democracies. Tunisia being the example that was supposed to make it, but is not. You know, yet we are associated with all these failed destabilizing endeavors, and of course, massively expensive.
Mm-hmm.
Let's change our paradigm. Let's change our framework, our point of view, and let's move forward consistent with what the region would like to see. And we certainly can be constructive if we want to be. And that's why I like these discussions about, you know, a rail connection. And let's, you know, I would, at the moment, so much of it is Abraham, of course, but at the moment, a lot of it is sort of Israel centric. You know, let's see if we can get Israel normalized and this sort of thing. I'd like for it just to be, let's talk about U.S. national interests and how they are served by a resurgent, responsible, regionally active, you know, players such as Saudi Arabia and others that are resolving their old problems first and turning to us for things like, if they need security, great, but also for technology and trade and commerce and investment.
I completely agree, and
Sorry,
very well said. No, I'm going to make this point in the next segment, but it's a really nice tie into this one, and that is part of the reason why our implementation sucks often in the region is because we have a very, you know, like they say, democracy is the worst system of all of them except for all the other ones. And it's like, you know, democracy, every 4 years, we may have a new president. So you are every 4 years are operating under a certain level of uncertainty. Well, like maybe the Iran deal will be rolled back. You know, maybe somebody will do something and they'll roll it back. And it's hard to predict in the region. Whereas when you have leaders that are there to stay, like Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, I mean, when he says something, he's going to do it. It's a point that I'm going to make in a little bit, but it's like, you have a consistency, you have something to depend on. And I think that's part of the reason why all of our large misadventures in the region have just been kind of poorly planned and thought out. We're sort of winging it because we don't know who's going to be making the decision in a few years. So anyway, it's interesting.
That's a great point. I mean, there's a whipsaw effect, you know, a whiplash effect when you go from Bush to Obama to Trump. You know, so yeah. I mean, certainly there's any habit of trust or confidence is eliminated when you just, you know, the empirical facts that indicate otherwise.
Yeah. Richard, this was a really good one on Syria, and it's something we've actually talked about. We talked about last week, and it's going to be one of the interesting stories going into the summer here. Like, what's next? What's going to happen? Is there going to be a sort of payout, like you mentioned, of, hey, we're going to give Assad, we're going to give you a bunch of money, but you got to get this Captagon out of the market like as soon as possible. There's going to be a lot on this topic, so it's going to be cool to stay on top of. And we formally invite, of course, Richard, is it Badr al-Saif?
Badr al-Saif.
Badr al-Saif, yes. Please join us. Your thread has made you worthy of being a guest to discuss some of this stuff. I think that would be cool. He's almost certainly listening, right, Richard? So
isn't everybody?
Might. Yeah,
Hi,
everybody is. Yeah. Richard, very good. A good one. My one big thing this week is NEOM. Also, actually, kind of in that kind of northern Saudi region. And there's actually, NEOM is something we've talked about or have at least mentioned in every single episode we've done of the 966, 86 episode. I'm pretty sure the word NEOM is in every single one of them. And sometimes we just kind of mention it in passing. You know, sometimes we talk about it in detail. But this week there was kind of a lot of news on NEOM. And I sort of wanted to, you know, you sent me today, Richard, this morning, an announcement, which I'll get to in 1 second, about a media partnership that NEOM made. And it sort of made me think, okay, we're actually pretty far along in NEOM's announcement. I mean, NEOM was announced, let's just calibrate everything with a little key context here. NEOM was announced on October 24th, 2017. And at the time, it sort of turned heads, even for a country known for big announcements and huge, ambitious plans. This was like the granddaddy of them all. And people were like, whoa, okay, $500 billion, located in a pretty remote region of the world, a remote region of Saudi Arabia in the Northwest. We're starting this, Saudi Arabia says, NEOM from scratch. We're just going to build it. It's going to cost a lot of money. And it was widely covered when it was announced. I mean, there are all these mega projects and giga projects being announced in Saudi Arabia. This one was widely covered because it sort of was the most ambitious. Some would say ridiculous. I mean, it was a big announcement. And so I think that you just kind of reflecting on that, it doesn't seem like it was announced that long ago, but it was now 7 years, almost 6 years. So when you talk about Saudi Arabia, Richard, with other Americans who don't pay attention at all, even to the region, let alone Saudi Arabia, NEOM actually is one of the questions, at least I get asked quite a bit anecdotally, but they're saying, hey, oh yeah, Saudi Arabia, what's up with this mirrored city that's 100 miles long and is going to be green? What's going on? Is that going to happen? And that's usually the follow-up question. Are they going to do it? Is this happening? And then, Richard, I would say that when it was first announced, you and I sort of looked at this, and I don't want to speak for you, but we sort of were like, this is really expensive and this is cool, but maybe what they get out of this is something short of what they actually plan. And that's okay. I mean, it's really good to plan big and see where that takes you, because a lot of times that drags you forward. I think I probably would have started off saying probably, but just a little bit of it, or maybe, 10 miles instead of 100. We still don't know. But the timeline for the implementation here was 2030, 2040, 2050, massive city of the future from scratch, remote part of the world. It's just not something you snap your fingers and do. Rome was not built in a day. That goes for NEOM as well, especially, even if you have this budget, you're still not going to do it. So NEOM was announced, big announcement. You still had, and then you sort of had like, okay, this is the plan. What's next? And then you had this trickle out of details. And these details are not small details. They're large details, like a new airport, the line, which is 109 miles, mirrored city. You had Oxagon and Trojena. I think, Richard, the rig is sort of part of NEOM. I'm not sure it's in the Red Sea. I'm sure we're going to get a bunch of comments on this, but isn't it kind of near NEOM, the rig theme park? Yeah.
Is that the thing that was refurbished, rethought out luxury thing, or entertainment thing on a rig?
Yeah, the steampunked thing. I couldn't find a location.
Well, it seems like if it were offshore, it'd be in the Gulf.
Yeah. Maybe that's right. Yeah.
But I don't know exactly where it is.
Well, so anyway, so you had these announcements coming out, and we talk about this a lot on the show, but these announcements were not just, hey, we're going to build this octagon shaped floating city. They were doing this with really well-produced Hollywood quality, beautiful videos with detailed renderings. They were sort of like hype videos, and they almost raised the stakes of what's going to happen. They said, no, this is going to look like this, and it's going to be amazing. It's going to be all green, even down to the specific details. So over the last few years, Richard, we're getting this information about NEOM, but you can't really see it. It's not like there's a surf cam outside of the NEOM area where you can look at it and you're like, oh, they're building that thing. Yep, it's coming along. Yeah. It's like, it's such a remote part of the world and no one can really go there, or at least tourists can't go there. So nobody's really seeing or checking in on what's happening. But as time goes on, Richard, you sent me today, and I'll mention this in a minute, but NEOM partnered with Getty Images and another sort of startup website called Unsplash, a visual content creator and marketplace site, to create and distribute an extensive visual library showcasing NEOM. So we're starting to see NEOM a lot more. We're starting to see it in, the beauty of it. We're starting to see things that are under construction. We're also starting to see some of the areas around it that will be untouched and remained untouched. But yeah, I mean, I'm sort of going all over the place with this thing, Richard, but when it really hit me that NEOM is not just going to happen, when it went from if to when, was actually when I met Jake Mum in Riyadh, right before he joined us on the podcast. And he talked about this on the show a little bit. He was essentially saying like, oh, no, NEOM and the line, it's not just going to happen. It's already happening. We are building it now. The spine in NEOM, we're up there right now building it. And it sort of hit me like, whoa, you're right. This has been a few years now. Like we should start seeing some results. So you start seeing more social media posts, workers skiing briefly in Trojena, people taking boats up to NEOM. So we're starting to see it take shape. And that's sort of where I now begin my one big thing. Sorry, again, I'm also long-winded today. Again, I'm sorry. But yeah, this week we sort of learned that for sure NEOM is going to open to tourists in 2024. So we had that announcement with the partnership with Getty Images and Unsplash. We also had comments from Antoni Vives, who is Chief Urban Planning Officer at NEOM, and he talked about Sindalah Island, which is one of those islands that will be open first right off of NEOM that will be really nice, ultra luxe. So Richard, we'll have to do our annual offsite there.
With a golf course.
Yes, with a golf course. And by saying that, you've mentioned golf, including it in the episode and keeping the streak going. But he talked about, hey, this is happening. First physical showcase of NEOM. It's opening in 2024. And so we've kind of got a lot of new art on NEOM this week. We had this piece, which was in Al Arabia, so we could see some new renderings of Sindalah Island, which again looks really, really, really cool. We have this launch of the website from NEOM, sort of a partnership with Getty and Unsplash. And we also had the announcement, Richard, that we will be getting, NEOM will have a lot of hotels. We're talking about, I saw the number here somewhere. I think I have it here.
The actual through the, so you've got Sindalah, you've got Oxagon, you've got Trojena, and you've got the Line as the four major anchors. Or is this so hotels throughout all these?
Hotels throughout all of these. There was an announcement. I thought I had it in my notes here, but anyway, so there was an announcement this week that there will be something like, I don't want to get the number wrong because it's going to live up there forever, but there was an announcement of plan for hotels, and it was some massive number. Enormous. So yeah, so again, not my best one big thing here, but it's just sort of like, it kind of hit me that this is really going to happen and that it is happening. And as soon as next year, you're going to be able to go to NEOM, you're going to be able to visit Sindalah Island, and you'll be able to see it. I mean, you'll be able to see it being under construction, the main city, but you will be able to go to Sindalah Island and kind of start experiencing what it's going to be like there. So yeah, NEOM's happening. That's my one big thing.
Well, it's, I mean, a couple of things on that. No, number one, on that announcement back, you said in 2017, right, of NEOM. Yeah, it should have been taken with a healthy dose of skepticism. And I think, skepticism continues to prevail. But, it's interesting because these pictures, and for those of you who listen to us via podcast, thank you very much. If you happen to look at the YouTube version of it, I'm sure you're going to include a lot of those pictures, Lucien, because they were made public. They're stunning.
They're stunning. Yep.
And the water, the land, the topography, the geology, all the nature, it's all really remarkable. And you can see why you can see how it'd be a great environment to try and do something like this. I also pair it in my own mind because they came out and I guess this speaks to me. In January this year, they came out with some footage about the construction. So actually the Line and the Oxagon, and that's what I was really interested in, seeing how much dirt's been moved and what's gone up and that sort of thing, because it's just so enormous. But two thoughts. One is, you mentioned 2017 on NEOM. What's even more remarkable is the Line was announced January 2021. I mean, just over 2 years ago.
Yeah.
So it, and my guess is that it wasn't even part of the thinking. And when NEOM was, they thought they'd come out and they'd do a futuristic city or something that was green and sustainable and so on, but that the Line configuration and I think it's vertical gravity, or so whoever there's some design school that's informing the architecture and the design of the Line. I don't think that was even in their thinking in 2017. Maybe it was, but nonetheless, it wasn't announced till 2021. So the Line is moving along at an especially quick pace too, when you think this just over 2 years for this enormous, breathtaking project. The other thing is Sindalah is like Sindalah is just made a dash up the back straight. You know what I mean? It wasn't even in the picture, and now it's going to be the first one out the gate next year.
Yeah, with the Four Seasons. I mean, that all that, you're right. All that happened so quickly.
Yeah, it was like, well, Sindalah, something's going to happen, and I think that was announced in the last 2 years at least, and now all of a sudden it's coming together. So it's interesting how that one has come out, again, come wide on the turn and is leading the pack right now in terms of getting, actually being executed and available for the public.
That takes a little pressure off of NEOM too. They can say, look, you're going to visit, this is part of NEOM, so you can come here and this is going to be finished. And then you'll be able to see that we're making progress. I just wanted to add, Richard, the figure that I saw was 150 hotels in the line. That's what they're shooting for.
Wow. When it's all done.
When it's all done. Yeah, that's a lot of hotels.
That's a lot of hotels. I hope that, and presumably they won't all be Lux, because, they have to cover all the ranges. But this also speaks to when you get down and look at stuff like this, and it makes perfect sense why Saudi Arabia has cut the OPEC, with Saudi urging and support, has cut production twice over the last 4 or 5 months in an effort to keep oil prices up. They can't afford a downturn. They've got tremendous commitments on the book. They've, as you say, these are lavishly promoted, and it's a significant part of their new identity. Vision 2030, these mega projects, giga projects, dynamic diplomatic role in the region. This is part of how they view themselves and how they want to change their world. And in order to do that, they need to have a steady and continued sufficient flow of revenue, and that means oil right now. Until the indeterminate future. So it's again, when you look at the scale of these projects and the amount of spending that is required to maintain them, and the excitement they engender in the Saudi population, which they want to sustain, they've got to keep oil prices up if they can.
If they can, but they're also hedging that bet by investing in renewables and green hydrogen, which we'll talk about in a little bit, and all this other stuff.
Yeah, exactly. And their non-oil economy is coming up, and their non-oil revenues in terms of the budget are coming up. They're making progress, but they're not going to be. They have to play this string out for as long as possible in order to make the transition.
Yep. Well said, Richard. What do you think? Let's, as we were bumping up against a hard stop.
Those were good. Thanks.
Those were good. Yeah.
You and I will enjoy these one big things. I'm not sure anybody else will.
Well, I know that our impressive large listener base will. Otherwise, we will hear from them and say, "Hey, you guys were a little off today." No, but yeah, that was really good. 2 very different topics there, and yeah, we'll jump right into Yallah this week, Richard.
Nice.
Yallah.
Saudi in a minute.
Yallah. We're having fun, everybody. So thanks for being with us.
I didn't have my Yallah voice, my Saudi in a minute voice. All right, Yallah number 1. Saudi ambassador to Washington, Princess Rima bint Bandar, visited a Boeing facility in Charleston, South Carolina, to celebrate Saudi Arabia's $37 billion deal struck in March to purchase Boeing 787s. Quote, this historic investment will create around 100,000 direct and indirect jobs in the U.S. across several states, including hundreds of suppliers and many small businesses, unquote. According to Princess Rima, this is the 5th largest commercial aircraft deal by value in Boeing's history.
Yeah, there's an image of this. Sorry.
Don't move. Don't move. You're like, it's very sensitive.
Shoot. Yeah. So there's a little cord here. If I move at all, I think I need a new cord. Okay. Anyway, sorry, everybody. There is a photo of this. We're going to include it in the video version of this podcast and in this segment. But Princess Rima was there, and it looks like South Carolina, like you mentioned, Richard, but you have Lindsey Graham there, and the photo is like, I can't even see how many people are in this photo, but it looks like 1,000 people all celebrating this. So
pretty cool.
It's a cool photo. The credit goes to Saudia, so we'll have it here. But yeah, this is one of the things, Richard, like you'll have a strong U.S.-Saudi relationship if you have deals like this, and then if you have smaller deals that fill in the gaps between these once in a generation mega purchases that are really cool. But this, as we said, thank goodness this isn't go to Airbus, because Airbus
be
pissed.
Well, it's the kind of thing we like. I mean, I mean, when you, so as she says, we're proud to partner with American companies to shape a more prosperous, secure future for Saudi Arabia and the Middle East. Kudos to Boeing. I mean, the 787 was introduced in 2009, and it was a bet on a particular kind of aircraft, and it's been a successful bet. I mean, the Dreamliner sold over 1,600 aircraft. It's continuing to going strong. It's really been a great U.S. corporate success in a critical segment. So it's nice for Boeing, and obviously we like to see this because it's a commercial expansion of the relationship, which again is something we think is very important and we want to see more of. And of course, we're all big fans of Princess Rima. So
Yeah,
this was a winner of a Yallah.
This was a winner of a Yellow. We should have saved this for last, so we got on a very high note. But yeah, I mean the other winner will be Riyadh when this airline launches, and we have some competition with Saudia for direct flights. Richard, I'm flying direct there in a few weeks, which I'm stoked about.
On Saudia.
On Saudia. So yeah. Thank goodness, because that actually saves almost a whole day of your life versus transferring pretty much anywhere else. So
it's awesome, but it's usually super expensive.
Yeah.
So I mean that's great. I am envious. Yeah, last time I was there, I had like a 6-hour layover in Heathrow.
Yeah, I've done that exact flight, and I was thinking about that one, but yeah, the time saving is like a whole day. And Heathrow's nice, and that British Air flight is nice, but but so Saudia will have a competitor, not a competitor, but there'll be two options, and you will be flying into a really sweet brand new airport of the future in Riyadh, which will take some time to build as well, but pretty cool. Yeah, good here. Good story for the U.S. Saudi relationship.
Your kids will be in high school probably by then.
Yeah, maybe
if you think about it.
I mean, inshallah. Yeah. Inshallah. I don't want my children to go to school. They'll be crime fighters. They don't need an education. Richard, Yallah number 2. I hope we have the same sheet of Yallahs here. The Saudi Tourism Authority says LGBT plus visitors.
We don't, but let's go with it.
Okay, we can. Should we?
No, that's okay. Sorry.
No, we should have coordinated this beforehand. We were so the way it works, everybody, since you get to see under the kimono here, is that we probably have 150 stories at least that go into our newsletters over the week. It's got to be more than that, maybe 300 actually. 30
a day. Yeah,
30 a day. So 150 is about right ish. Yeah. So we have a lot to choose from when we choose these topics, and so we kind of just without really discussing it, use ESP and realize like what we've discussed recently and what topics are maybe more worthy of discussion versus the, top end stuff that everybody sees. So when we put this together, it takes a little bit of jockeying, and that's sometimes we end up on the wrong page. So
yeah, and we do swap suggestions, and we usually come up with a final cue, but
we just
this had a late poaching from this, because that's what happens. Some of the Yellahs get graduated up to one big thing.
Yes, and I should mention before I read this that this story cropped up last week, and I sort of thought, and I'm sure you thought the same thing, Richard. I was like, well, it's interesting. We'll see about this, because it was sort of like it wasn't widely reported. So, and we sort of like, yeah, interesting. But this was in Yahoo.com. So according to Yahoo.com, the Saudi Tourism Authority says LGBT plus visitors are welcome in Saudi Arabia. In the FAQ section of the STA's website, somebody inquired whether or not the LGBT plus visitors were welcome in Saudi Arabia. The response was, quote, "Everyone is welcome to visit Saudi Arabia, and visitors are not asked to disclose such personal details."
I don't ask, don't tell. I think Skift, who covers global travel, estimates that the LGBTQ travel market is worth about $218 billion worldwide. And they tend to spend more of their budget, a home budget on travel, 10% of its purchasing power, or nearly $100 billion on travel in the US alone. So it's a traveling demographic. And, Saudi Arabia, as we know, is making a big bet on tourism. It doesn't want to exclude anybody. So it's like, it wants people to feel comfortable coming. And I think it's, obviously that's for the community to decide. I couldn't I'm sure Saudi Arabia wants them to come. I'm sure Saudi Arabia doesn't want them to be, very demonstrative in their lifestyle. But again, don't ask, don't tell. I mean, people have to remember, and again, it personally, if I were, gay, I would go. I would understand that I wouldn't be out there while I was there. But also, I think you have to understand that for the longest time in Saudi Arabia, you don't have to understand anything, but as a suggestion, um, the royal family, and let's go back pre Mohammed bin Salman, pre King Salman, but also King Salman. The royal family would historically be seen as a little more progressive than society. I mean, things like women's education and other things. The royal family was pushing the envelope. And this, in many ways, is still the case. The Saudi population is conservative. It is not comfortable with alternative lifestyles. It's very excited about tourism. It's very excited to show off its country. And in this article, which was a good article, someone in the LGBTQ community went there and said, I couldn't be out like I normally am, but I was really struck by how friendly everybody was. So you and I both know this. Anybody who goes to Saudi Arabia knows this. So they want the tourism experience and experiment to work. They want to welcome people, but you can't go there and be flamboyantly LGBTQ and expect not to have some pushback. And again, if I were to, I wouldn't speculate, but all that to say is, I mean, let's put some context here. Yes, they would love you. Yes, it's don't ask, don't tell, but understand that the country, by the way, as with almost everybody in the region, everybody in Africa, not everybody, but most countries and most populations, they are much more conservative than the US, much more conservative than Europe, and especially on alternative lifestyle issues. So I don't know if that adds to the discussion, but I just think it's important to point out.
No, I think that absolutely does. I was just sort of thinking as you were speaking there, Richard. I mean, this doesn't mean any laws are changing. This wasn't like an official change in local laws on how this works. This just kind of removes some confusion as to, like, if you're a person of this orientation, can I go to Saudi Arabia? Like, am I allowed to go? Will they arrest me at the airport when I arrive? And the answer is no. But that also is this statement on the Tourism Authority website is not a changing of laws regarding this. And I think, I mean, it's a delicate subject, obviously, but we all have personal opinions about this. And in my opinion, I really don't care what anyone's orientation is. I to the point where I also don't really want to know. I don't care. Like, it's their decision. And the reality is, I also believe in self-determination. I believe that if a vast majority of people in a country want things a certain way, just like in our country, that they should be the ones to determine that. And I think in Saudi Arabia, like you just said, it is a very traditional society, very conservative. They don't want this, I don't think. I don't know, but I want them to have what they want. I don't want to impose anything on them, and we shouldn't. And so,
you saw it in Doha on the World Cup. Let's say move away from Saudi Arabia. There was a lot of people there who were, had the rainbow flag, and the authorities said, "You're welcome." A lot of people, a lot of locals were not happy.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
they're just, they're not, it's a conservative society, just like in the U.S. It takes a long time to turn that ship if it's going to turn. So again, if I were gay, I would go to Saudi Arabia and feel perfectly comfortable. I would also be smart about it. And by the way, when my mom lived in Saudi Arabia, she loved it. It was great, but she also didn't go out in a bikini. She wore a abaya. She dressed conservatively because that was the sensitive and respectful thing to do. So you have to, understand your environment, have some court awareness. But absolutely, if you're in the LGBTQ community, go see some of the amazing stuff in Saudi Arabia. Be smart, you'll be just fine.
Yeah. And also, I mean, I'm sure many LGBT people have already visited Saudi Arabia without 100%. Incident because they just knew how to behave. They knew what to do to follow local laws. I mean, that the State Department always says that, hey, just follow the local rules and, you should be good pretty much wherever you go. Yeah, I mean, this is not laws changing. This is just, hey, like, everybody's welcome to come, but respect our local laws, which, do not
Oh,
allow
and
for
by the
this.
way, and actually we should go to the end of that quote. So I think I thought I had it here. An STA spokesperson said in a statement, this, and I guess we should have just gone to this. I apologize, everyone listening, because we just covered this in a long-winded way. The STA spokesman said in a statement, quote, "Everyone is welcome to visit Saudi, provided that they follow and respect our culture, traditions, and laws, as you would when you visit any other country in the world. Like other governments, we do not ask visitors personal questions and we respect the right to privacy," unquote. There it is.
There it is. Yep. Yeah.
Um,
I mean, in the US too, Richard, this isn't like a resolved situation. I mean, we
no.
are more advanced without question, but there's still people refusing to drink Bud Light because it was associated with an LGBTQ person
Transgender, yeah.
or whatever. Yeah. And it's like, okay,
Yeah.
so we still are dealing with this. So anyway, yeah, we'll put a bow on that, but interesting topic.
Interesting. It's a good one.
Yeah.
This
Yep.
has been a good one. We
Yeah.
got all
This is
sorts of
good.
stuff.
Yeah.
I'm gonna so going to is it
Number
me?
three. Number three.
Number
Yes.
three,
I'm
lucid.
excited to hear what you have. By the way, I don't know if it's going
So
to
this will this will
have.
this will dictate what comes because it could be coming out anywhere. Who knows? Um, Lucid losses put Saudi Arabia's EV strategy in the headlamps. Lucid, a U.S. company in which the public investment fund, Saudi Public Investment, owns a 60.46% stake, fell well short of analyst forecast on Tuesday with a sharp first quarter revenue fall and a cut to its 2023 production outlook, according to Reuters. That performance could put another potential dent in Saudi plans to build its own EV industry, which includes Lucid's first manufacturing plant outside the U.S. as part of the far-reaching diversification plan led by Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman.
Richard, there were some interesting comments in this Reuters piece. First of all, almost every EV firm that isn't Tesla is having a hard time right now, and that's just the way it is. And that includes some quite viable companies like Rivian and others. And then you also have, some that won't make it. But Lucid's going to make it. And Richard, we talked, it should have been your one big thing last week, but I'm glad it wasn't because Captagon was awesome. But you got to drive in a Lucid. It's a freaking awesome car. And so, but one of the quotes from this is the EV manufacturing plan is still one of the boldest parts of the Saudi plan, said Justin Alexander, director at Haliji Economics and golf analyst at Golf Source Partners. It is bold to basically tech transfer a massive EV company and set it up in Saudi Arabia and manufacture it. And so I'm not surprised to hear it's struggling, but it's also, that's kind of how everything is going right now.
Yeah, you're right. Tesla's the only high-end one that is moving along. Further, another quote from that article, which is a good one, and maybe gives some insight into what the Saudis are looking at. It's, quote, "Rather than fixing on short-term results, the future of PIF's stake in Lucid will be dependent on the plans to build a Lucid factory in Saudi, on taking Lucid private again, and or on the potential integration with Sear," unquote. This was Global Sovereign Wealth Fund Managing Director Diego Lopez. Sear is another EV maker that they have a joint venture with. It's an Apple Foxconn, and they are also going into the King Abdullah Economic City, where Lucid will be on that Red Sea coast. So you see them growing. You see them sort of the germination of a plan here, and yeah, I didn't know. I think it's interesting. Saudi has remained a committed investor in Lucid. They invested around 3.6 billion in 2018. In March this year, they loaned them another 266 million, and about that again last April. And the Saudi Industrial Development Fund also loaned the company 1.4 billion in 2022. So your point is a good one about this one won't fail, because obviously Lucid, for all these companies, cash, burn rate and cash reserves and that sort of thing is critical. It's awfully nice to have, a committed PIF behind you. The other thing is, from what I understand about Lucid, a lot of, not only is the car quite stunning and technologically really impressive, but that technology is something that's valuable too. battery technology and other things. And these are all things that I guess Saudi Arabia isn't just investing in, the production of EVs. It's investing in the technology. And Lucid seems to be a good bet. The problem is supply chains, inflation, production line issues have really dampened their stock price. And by the way, they and Rivian have just been slammed.
Mm-hmm. I've seen Sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to cut you off.
Year over year, January. I mean, in January 22, Rivian was over $100. Lucid was about 40. They're now, or that's beginning of this year, and they'll be lower. They're both under 20.
Bargain hunting time.
And this will happen.
That'll happen. Yep.
But you've got people, Ford, GM, NEO, Volkswagen. They're all out there, and some of these Chinese manufacturers, BYD and SGMW, are doing over 1 million units a year and moving along at the lower end. The F-150 Lightning's doing well. The E-Mustang is doing well. So there's some electric vehicles out there are doing okay. I don't know if any of them are making money except for Tesla. Tesla's making real money now.
Tesla is crushing it, and they're beating production forecast and everything. Just wanted to add, last thing, we tied into the whole NEOM thing. I mean, that's where they're going to be putting one of the Lucid factories. And, building a EV factory is extraordinarily complex. It's not something you just snap your fingers and do, or even like copy from the US and try to bring over, because it's complex. So, it's going to take some time, but they are manufacturing cars. There's a lot of EV automakers that got big money, Series B and C investments, that will not make a single car. So, Lucid's out there. I see them driving around here, Richard, and I know you drove one, and Rivian is out there. I saw a few of those and they look sweet.
I see a fair number of Rivians, but more, I don't see a fair number. I see some Rivians. Yeah. It's funny, cool. From the back, it looks just like a normal pickup truck. What's distinctive is those headlights, and obviously it's electric. So
they're like 100 Gs too. So
well, and that's the problem. The luxury, there definitely, I feel like there'll be a shakeout in the luxury end of EVs, because that's where everyone's coming in. That's where the early adapters are. But can you make money there? And I think as some of these bright people were saying in the article, I mean, it's a long-term play. So my guess is they'll ride it out.
Richard, Yallah number 4. Surprise, Yallah. Saudi Arabia to develop Medina into a modern Islamic and cultural destination. Saudi Arabia is planning to transform Islam's second holiest city of Medina into a, quote, modern Islamic and cultural destination, according to a report yesterday by Arab News. The project, which is part of the Kingdom's Vision 2030 strategy, will be overseen by the Ruha Al Madina Holding Company, a real estate firm owned by the PIF, in partnership with, I get this messed up actually, Richard, but yeah, so this project is sort of, if you can see it, and we'll have images of it, is huge, is absolutely massive.
It is.
And they are really going to change the face of that city in some areas.
I like it. This is a good one because, again, this is like the Jeddah Central project, or some of what they're doing in the Southwest, the Asir and the Sauda projects. And we were talking about, when I came back and when I was there in Riyadh, I happened to learn that they're going to be doing this in the Eastern province too. I mean, these are some huge projects going on, and you don't hear much about the rural Medina, but yet it's an enormous undertaking. And again, it makes sense. They're trying to translate. They want 30 million pilgrims by 2030, and they want those pilgrims to come and spend money and have nice places to stay and want to stay over and go see the sites. So it's all interlocking, and it makes sense. And certainly, this project is fascinating in both its scope and also its sort of modernity. It really has a design city feel to it.
It looks cool. It looks awesome. Richard, just this week, they announced another 1,056 keys as part of a deal with a core group. We actually featured this today in the Sustig newsletter. So signed a deal with the Accor Group, which is a French hotel brand with a lot of names you'd probably recognize: Swiss Hotel, Novotel, and Fairmont. So they'll have those three hotels going in. They also signed a deal with Marriott, US-based Marriott, last month, or maybe it was earlier this month. But recently they signed a deal with Marriott, and they will open 8 hotels with 4,400 rooms, and they'll have a Ritz-Carlton, Marriott, Westin, Le Méridien, Four Points, a Loft. So yeah, that's 2 massive deals, and you can just see there's going to be at least 15 hotels there. That it'll be a huge city to visit, which is cool.
Exactly.
Cool.
Toy giant, Yallah number 5. Toy giant Hasbro and Saudi Entertainment Adventures 7 are teaming up to launch the world's first Transformers-themed indoor entertainment centers. You need to tell me why you included this one. Are you a secret Transformers fan?
I'm not. I did watch the original cartoon when I was a kid with the robots in disguise, Yeah.
The theme parks will open at 3 of 7's entertainment destinations in Saudi Arabia. Each of the parks will have themed attractions and immersive experiences depicting Autobots' heroics and the scheming of the Decepticons.
Yeah, I don't know why I included this, Richard, but it's just cool.
It's a good one.
Go ahead.
Look, I went to the World Boulevard in Riyadh in March. It was awesome. It was so impressive. It was vast. It was creative. It was well executed. It was clean. It was all around entirely positive experience. And I was there solo. I was just tromping around. So it was great for me, some American guy. It'd be extraordinary for families, and that's what I saw mostly, Saudis with families. It has a lagoon. It has things to do. It has it was really, and it like I said, it was vast. It took me a long time to walk around the whole thing, and all of it was interesting and fun. All that to say is, this, seven is a public investment fund firm. It's planning to invest $13.3 billion to develop 21 integrated entertainment destinations in 14 cities. So we're talking Riyadh, Harj, Mecca, Jeddah, Taif, Dammam, Khobar, Lhasa, and elsewhere, for the purpose of giving people things to do. I mean, this is a quality of life issue, and they're going at it hard. This one, I guess there's 3 of those 21. You'll have Transformers, and I think the one that open here is Al Hamra, which is in Riyadh. And I think 2 of them are open now. One in Tabuk, one in Riyadh. Maybe not they're open, but about to be open. So anyway, it's they're expected. This one in Riyadh is expected to have 6 million visitors a year. It's going to have an indoor adventure center, an edutainment attraction, clip and climb, 40 unique challenges, of course, Transformers themes, ride-based attraction. Cool. Just, going from nothing to do in Riyadh, say go to the desert or drift or whatever, to just having all sorts of things to do.
Yeah. The only thing I kind of want to add to this, and this is a little bit out there, but we did talk about sort of Saudi Arabia changing as a society, and fighting radicalism, especially in the early 2000s. From 2001 to 2006, they had a really terrible homegrown terrorism problem, and they coordinated with the United States closely on that to fight it and defeat it. Part of the reason why a lot of these young people were going into Islamic terrorism is because they were incredibly bored and they were unstimulated and they were just sitting around. And now you look at Saudi Arabia, and you can pretty much anywhere you live, you're not going to be bored. You're going to have these opportunities to go out and see and interact with other people and become part of society. I know, again, that's out there, but Saudi Arabia today is completely different, and things like this help.
Well, it's usually not a good formula to have your youth unengaged and unemployed, unengaged, and bored, which actually apparently, and this is one of the most exciting things, at these theme parks, so there's 21, apparently there's a plan for 8 Play-Doh theme parks to open Now, a Play-Doh theme park, I would be a lot of fun.
That would be sweet. I know my kids would be stoked about that
Oh,
for
would,
sure.
wouldn't they? And you're saying you wouldn't be stoked?
Well, I would pretend like I wasn't, but yeah, I'd be super excited. Richard, Yallah number 6. Saudi Arabia and Netherlands agree to collaborate on green energy. Saudi Arabia and the Netherlands on Thursday signed a memorandum of understanding to collaborate on the development of green energy and hydrogen. The Netherlands could be the main destination for the transport of hydrogen derived from renewable energy sources from Saudi Arabia to Europe. Saudi Arabia's Minister of Energy, Prince Abdulaziz bin Salman, said at the World Hydrogen Summit in Rotterdam.
Interesting. I think people forget, I don't know if people forget, but it's easy to forget that, especially anything energy related, but any of these capital intensive mega projects are marathons. And I say that because this article was in the Sustig Review today, along with another article that had the CEO of Saudi Aramco, Amin Nasser, talking about the difficulties in marketing blue hydrogen because it's too expensive. And blue hydrogen is, just as many of you know, is produced in Saudi Arabia. They'll do it with natural gas, but it's carbon capture that reduces emissions, so it qualifies as blue. It's not green, which is produced by renewable energy, so there's zero emissions, or close to zero. But he's saying that when we go out to the market and analysts talk with us, they're saying it's the equivalent of $250 a barrel today, which means it's 3 times higher than the current Brent price. So, which means there's not a market for it. There's people producing it, but there's not a market for it. Interestingly enough, Netherlands, and go back to your Yallah, which is a good one. Netherlands is one of 2 EU countries that has subsidies for imported green hydrogen, and blue hydrogen is not part of the project. But I say that, and this is one of the interesting things about Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia is gearing up to produce 2.2 gigawatts of green hydrogen out of NEOM. And a lot of that, I think, is going to go, will go to EU. But it's interesting in this that they're saying, all right, Netherlands and Rotterdam is a good point of entry for us. And if they're building facilities, maybe we can do green hydrogen. But all that to say is there's a long way between here and there. And a lot of it has to do with technology. A lot of it has to do with, markets materializing. A great deal of it has to do with government subsidies to make it happen. And not just Saudi Arabia, we're talking globally, because, they don't make market sense, blue hydrogen anyway, but maybe in other ways too. They don't make market sense unless it's helped out initially with government subsidies. So anyway, this is a good Yallah because it sort of leads us into a bunch of different things. But the thing I always, same thing with the giga projects, same thing with so much of what they do. They announce it now, but it's not going to be seen or realized for some time to come. And there's a tremendous amount of investment and work between here and there.
Yeah.
Hydrogen as a viable revenue producing export is still a distance away.
Mm-hmm. Yep. Richard, we are up against our hard stop, and I don't want to add anything on top of that.
Beautifully done.
Great point. Yes, look at the timing. It's pretty perfect.
I know, spot on. Well done.
This was a good one, Richard. We will be back with episode 87. And once again, losing my microphone.
You moved. Don't move.
It would be so good to have that happen one more time, wouldn't it? Sorry, everybody. We will be back next week with episode 87. And Richard, thank you very much. This was a good one. I'm going to clap lightly so I don't unplug anything.
Yeah. Don't disrupt the whole. Yeah, this was great. Thank you, Lucien.
Thank you. See you next week.